Hello and welcome to the Financial Independence UK podcast. Join your hosts Tom and Alex as we talk about wealth creation, financial planning and personal development specifically for the UK. Hello and welcome back to another episode of the FI UK podcast. Tom is here with me, and today we're going to discuss behavioural finance, how our money behaviours can impact our long-term wealth building. So, Tom, say hello and we'll get cracking.
Hey, Alex. Yeah, I've been looking forward to this one as well.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing because both of us are in our wealth accumulation stage. So the decisions we make currently can have huge either benefit or detriment to our long-term financial health. So today we're going to discuss how our emotional states impact our financial choices, and also what we've learned up until this point. So we've learned money lessons, financial lessons from our parents. So we're going to have a quick talk about what we've learned from them, see if there's any differences or similarities. We're going to talk about unlearning previously learned bad habits to do with money. And that can be as simple as just learning something new and then changing your financial approach based on new information. So does that all sound good, Tom? And we'll get going.
Yeah, I like it. I was going to call this a meaty episode, but actually I think it's quite the opposite. I think it's quite like a floaty episode. We're not talking about figures and accounts and interest rates here. We're talking about the sort of philosophical side of personal finance.
Yeah, that's it. So it's more, language rather than numerical kind of stuff. So I think it's important to recognize that people inherently purchase things or sell things based on emotional states. We buy things because it makes us happy for a period of time, which is something we've discussed before in terms of advertising and being susceptible to those. And we've covered strategies for managing that in previous episodes. One of us will link it underneath this one if you'd like to have a listen back to that. So I think our emotional states are very much tied to the purchases and the decisions we make. Tom and I have tried to think about this from like a robot state, like an emotionally void kind of state, so we can make good financial decisions. But humans are inherently that. We're human. We are susceptible to these things. So it's important to recognize it and I think make the best decision you can at the time of making it.
Yeah, I totally agree. This is quite a common theme in something like poker. A lot of people who aren't experienced in poker can think of it as a game of chance, but when you start to sort of pay attention to it and think about it mathematically, it's a game of some somewhat complex structures, and it's all about sort of decision making based on the information you have and based on any information that you can read about the current situation you're in. So it's all about, once you've made a decision, it doesn't matter what happens, it doesn't matter what the result or the outcome is. It's about, did you make the right decision given the evidence that was available? And if you consistently do that enough, then you should make money in something like poker.
Yeah, definitely. I agree. I think it can be summed up as our emotions like cloud our judgment, which can lead to what in hindsight could be considered irrational financial decisions. All humans are vulnerable to their emotions and kind of outside external influences. And I think it's equally as important to recognize that as humans, we make mistakes. We're not perfect. And the best thing we can do is acknowledge those, reflect upon them, and learn what we can do to change that decision-making process, to reduce kind of the impact that our emotions can have when it comes to finances. Because if you have a lot of money invested, it can be really painful to see it drop. And currently, we're in the middle of a bit of a drop in the markets. How deep that goes is yet to be known, but that's the beauty of hindsight. And something I thought about today whilst checking my Vanguard index funds for the 5th time this week, that actually the way I feel about it at the moment could be quite useful. So I don't feel utter dread if this were to happen, if we added, 2 zeros to the end of all of my accounts and things got really serious.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is a great exercise, as we've spoken before we start recording this show, that it's good for it to happen in the early stages when you've only got a few thousand or a few sort of tens of thousands of pounds in your index funds. Whereas if you had hundreds of thousands, or even if you had like £1 million in your investment portfolio, you see that drop by 20%. That's kind of a sickening amount of money to lose when it takes so long to build up that. So this this is a sort of good exercise for prepping for the future, and think about how you're going to react to that.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, imagine how you would feel if you saw a 25% drop and you had a million quid sitting in your index fund. I would say that would cause some serious kind of mental health strains as well. You'd have to be pretty well emotionally resilient and financially resilient to manage that. It's Yeah, it can be difficult, and it is going to be difficult. Nobody ever said this journey would be easy. There are ups and downs, of course. And I think there is a bit of a benefit to learning them now when we're kind of in our infancy. As we do as humans, we learn all throughout our life, so long as we're prepared to take on board new information and lessons. So I think it's a good thing we've been through, and we can only learn from it and kind of progress further. Tom, what do you think about we've talked about making decisions using the best information that's available. Have you ever had to unlearn something that you've previously learned based on new information or based on a new method of perhaps or a new approach of doing something?
I think there are quite a few things I learned sort of during my childhood about my parents' financial decisions. They weren't terrible financial decisions by any stretch. My parents, they've never been amazing with money, but they've never been terrible. They've never missed a bill payment. They've got an excellent credit score. They've always kept the payments for their mortgage and stuff like that. But there's always been a couple of decisions where I sort of thought I would do that a little bit differently. So growing up, I always thought like, oh, I need to buy a house as soon as possible because buying a house is a great investment, right? That's a great thing to do. Everyone does it. And then you sort of keep making home improvements and then you buy a bigger house. And that's something that my parents had always done. And they've sort of built up a good amount of wealth in their home, like as in equity in their property. But that's something that I had to sort of unlearn when I learned about the power of, say, renting and then investing the money in the stock market in the hope that it will outpace the capital growth in your house and things like that. That's like it's one of the biggest things that I've had to unlearn and think about in a different way.
Yeah, I think that's an important point. A lot of people think buying a house, buying bricks is always a good investment because it will always have a value because people will always need somewhere to live. But it's a bit of a double-edged sword because all of that money, like you say, Tom, the equity your parents have built up is locked in that house. They could liquidate it and sell it, but if all the other houses around you, places you'd like to live, cost similar, actually it's got no spending power for you and it's got no actual value as like pounds and notes in your pocket. Well, which is an interesting thing because it's similar to my own parents have done the exact same as you. I guess it's the generation kind of been brought up in. And that is a message that's been passed on to me as well. But I also would take a slightly different approach as using the investment things and not just using capital appreciation, because I don't think we live in the climate that would support that particularly. I don't know how much housing prices can go up. So that's something that we've had to learn slightly differently to adapt our approach to things. Another interesting thing that I've learned from my parents is both my mum and dad are self-employed. They were very, very risk averse. I remember my dad speaking to me about money. He always said, save some of what you earn and don't be risky with your money because you can lose it. And as a result, through my 20s, I was very risk averse. I would get what I know now to be pitiful interest rates on my money. And that's basically come from the lesson I've learned from him. He said to me he would rather see his money remain the same, not thinking about inflation, obviously, than have any risk of losing it whatsoever. So through my 20s, I followed his advice. I did exactly that. And thinking about all of the gains I could have made on that money, it means I'd be in a much better financial position now if I'd gone against it. But then that is hindsight for you, and that's a lovely thing to have.
Yeah, I think there are a lot of things that you can look back on, not just for your parents, but plenty of other people that when you look back in hindsight, you go, oh, God, I'm glad I didn't do that, or I'm glad I've got the option to not make that decision. I think one of the key takeaways from how I've seen my parents handle their money is sort of organization. It's that, I've got a spreadsheet. I know where pretty much every penny that I own, I know exactly where that is and what sort of fund it's in or what interest rate it's receiving or what account or whatever. And I think just having this oversight of your finances as a whole, I think it's very good for behavior because you start to think, are these spots, is this where my money should be? Could it be in a better spot? Is there a better account? Is there a better fund? I think, you keep making those decisions very soon if you're sort of close to optimize.
Yeah, I think it's important to question whether the decisions you've made in the past are still correct and relevant, because you're at risk of kind of leaving your money to just languish in accounts that aren't even matching inflation, let alone giving you a real return on your money. So I think it's always important to review your financial position, especially if a life change happens to you and you need to kind of plan for something else. There can be anything from children to having to move house to wanting to study abroad. Anything like that can really kind of make your financial plan veer off track. Yeah, so I think it's a very important thing, and it's something that people should be doing. But also, if you're not if you don't have a good idea of where all your money is, that's a very good first step to begin understanding where your money goes, what you can do to make the most of it. Because I think time is such a useful thing that we currently have on our side, and I feel quite grateful to have learnt these lessons being 31. I'd rather learn them now at 31 than learn them at 61, because I have 30 years of compounding kind of on my side.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think it's definitely a bit of a buzzword at the moment, but to be intentional with your money is a great thing to do, to have a strategy, to have an idea behind every pound that you place in an account is a great thing to do, and have an idea of your short-term, medium-term, long-term goals and say, I want to reach this point. How do I do it? Do I need to invest? Do I need to save? Do I need to buy a house or sort of set up a business? And I think having an oversight of this sort of stuff would definitely help the sort of lifetime strategy of your finance.
Yeah, you wouldn't travel somewhere really far away without a map or some kind of GPS or navigation system. So I don't think the journey that we take, or a bit dissimilar to a car journey, we should still have some kind of map, some kind of direction, because without that, you could be going in totally the opposite direction. And I think it's an important thing to evaluate the decisions you've made, because they could be right at the time, but then, as we've seen recently with the kind of the market volatility, things can change in a week or two. So if you leave kind of your financial things just to sit and do nothing, it can have a big adverse effect. So there is an argument for changing and just reevaluating kind of your position. And if you need to do anything, to make those decisions with intention, with reason, and speak to like-minded people. They might think of something you haven't thought of. And I think that's a useful thing to do. So, like, if you can share a problem, you can get different points of view on it, some things that you might not think about, because you're so engrossed in watching your accounts and planning for your journey. Other people can have really useful input that can maybe change or alter your own approach.
Yeah, this brings us back to something that you say quite often, Alex, and it's having a financial plan, writing it down, signing it, sort of being intentional from the outset. And as you say, if you get feedback from friends and family members on your plan, on your signed document, then I think it's only going to help. It gives you this sense of perspective that probably not able to gain just by yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's also important to take the opinions of other people in the context that they've been made. So, for example, I think, Tom, you would give me much, much different advice than my own mother would. I mean, recently my mother was mortified that I've dropped a couple of hours at work to kind of pursue a different creative endeavor. She was like, "Oh, you can't do that. Where will your money come from?" And she panicked about it. Whereas I think you would say something slightly different than her, because she obviously worries about me, even though I'm 31 and I'm a fully fledged grown up. She continues to see me as a 10-year-old kid and can't stand on his own feet, etc. So take the advice you get. By all means, take it on board. Use the ideas, be emotionally intelligent, take the best bits, compare them, and actually put them against your plan of what you have. Will using their advice get you towards your destination quickly? Is it veering you off course? Or will it speed things up? I think they're all things that should be considered when you take advice from other people.
Well, you did mention your plan to me about taking up tree surgery courses before you sort of dropped your hours at work. And to be honest, I thought it was a great idea. As you say, I'm not your mother. I don't look at it as how many hours in a week that you work sort of thing. No, I think it's good that at this sort of age, you've got the opportunity to do that. Take on a new challenge or something which is perhaps like a little bit higher risk that you wouldn't want to do when you're 40.
No, I think it's better to higher up because I would literally having to climb trees as well as doing it. But I think my main motivation for it is to be able to have two sets of income. I mean, nursing, I hope, will always be available to me, but it can be quite mentally tiring and there's quite a lot of mental strain that goes on with the job. Anybody who works for the NHS can probably attest to that. And I think it gives me choice and freedom to actually, if I do find a particular thing quite straining, I can switch to the other profession for a bit, do some kind of work in a totally different environment. I mean, being at the top of a tree or in a forest is very different to a hospital ward, and I think it just helps me balance personally what life throws at me, and it gives me the ability to kind of learn new things and keep kind of learning.
So if I were to say, right, I like your advice, I want to start making changes. If I said, I've got all these habits though, I've got all this money in this stupid place, or I'm in loads of debt, how do I change my habits? How do I start on this path to make it better?
You can do that simply with a pen and paper. Work out what you need to do to get out of debt. I mean, it's common sense, but we've talked about it before, that being in consumer debt is not a good place to be for your financial health. So work out how you can get out of debt. You can use the snowball method of paying off numerous debts if you have them. I would say that's of the utmost importance. And I think changing habits is something that takes time. Don't expect them to change overnight, over a weekend. I've done a bit of reading kind of throughout my nurse training about habits and unlearning poor practices and like bad clinical practice. And it's best to change habits slowly and with intention. And I've read a couple of studies about how habits are formed and changing them. And it takes on average 66 repetitions to change a habit for good. Otherwise, you'll find you keep slipping back to old habits because you might find them easier. But it's important to also note that the best time to change a habit is way before you needed it. But the second best time to change a habit, just like planting a tree, is now. But don't rush yourself. Take it easy. Change one thing at a time. Don't be overwhelmed by massive amounts of change and feeling you have to be perfect with it. Life is all about kind of just trying your best with what you have. So don't feel like you have to follow a particular perfect plan that comes out that you think you should be sticking to. If it's unrealistic, it can be very difficult to kind of stay true to that path. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I do. I really like that. I think it's important to have a place for people to start, because I think a lot of this stuff can be overwhelming. And if you said, all right, I think you should do all these things, you should have these accounts, you should do these things, you're going to like pay off this debt using this method, it's all very overwhelming. But to give someone the first basic steps and do these things first, I think it's much more actionable advice for people.
Yeah, definitely. I think if we wrote a list of all the small changes we've made along this journey to financial independence, there would be an awful lot of them. And imagine trying to do all of those all at once. You'd just be like, oh, I don't know where to start. Which is the most important? How do I do it? Have I got time to do all of this in my schedule? It would probably put a lot of people off, to be honest. But I think it's important to know that we don't make all these changes all at once. People are creatures of habit, humans, and it's very important just to take it slowly, be mindful with it, be intentional. There's the I word again, and just make changes when you feel comfortable to do them, and seek support where you can. I mean, feel free to drop Tom or I a question. If we can help you, of course we will. But I think taking small steps within any journey is the way to make progress. The exact same as what we say about index funds. Just fill them small and often, and over time, the benefits of compounding, not just compound interest, but compounding of good decision making, will pay off massively in the future.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've done a really good job of covering the sort of ins and outs of behavioural finance.
Yeah, I think that I first kind of stumbled across behavioural finance when I listened to a podcast by Andy Hart, who's also called the Maven Advisor. He's very much into behavioural finance, and the stuff he produces is top kind of class advice. It's very, very good. So if you haven't already heard it, have a quick listen to some of those episodes. I've learned an awful lot about changing financial habits, making good decisions through listening to somebody like him, and actually you're leveraging somebody's experience that he's had for kind of 20 years. We use that experience for our benefit.
Yeah, I really like Andy's podcast. It's fantastic. He deliberately stays away from topical conversations about market performance and stuff to try and get that away from the behavioural side of your brain. Just think about what can I do, what steps can I take.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very important to kind of be intentional and don't rush it. We've got a lot of years to kind of go through this, and if we continually make good decisions, it will pay off kind of dividends, hopefully monetary as well as in the future. So I think if you have any questions or queries or anything we've discussed, this podcast a little bit shorter than normal, feel free to drop us a question, and we can pick it up in a future episode. If you disagree with anything we've said, or you think you've got some other points of view that we haven't covered, by all means, drop them in a comment below, because we can always learn from you. And hopefully you can learn from us and you can get some value from what we've said. Tom, do you have anything else to add?
No, I think we've done a pretty good job. I'm quite happy with it. What we've covered. Thanks for listening, everyone.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And we'll see you next time for episode 9. Thanks for listening to the Financial Independence UK podcast. We hope you found it useful. If you have any questions or ideas for us, feel free to email at fi.ukpodcast@gmail.com. Until next time.